Well, this drawing is kind of a major drawing, except for one problem. You know why collectors would want it? It's a workhorse. It's a draft horse. It's a Clydesdale, you know? The only person I probably would have to bid against would Budweiser, you know? But it's beautiful. It's an exquisite drawing, but it isn't a racehorse. And so you could just see some dealer going, I can't sell it to my guy because it's a, you know, next slide. Or, well, this one here, of course, is very much related to our friend over here, Edward Muybridge. And of course, you all know Edward Muybridge. He was the one that worked with Leland Stanford on the locomotion of the horse and all the figured things. And of course, he's the only one that's actually related to up here in Napa and Sonoma County, because of course he came up here in 1872 and went to a local, he took the train up. Can you imagine? You can't get a train now, but in 1872, you could take a train from San Francisco up to Calistoga, walked into a bar and asked, said, is Mr. Lukens here? And Mr. Lukens said, yes, I'm here. And Muybridge said, I've got a message for you, and he shot him dead.
Wow.
He shot him dead because Mr. Lukens was fooling around with his wife.
Oh.
And the only reason he got off, because normally there'd be a short trial and a hanging, but what happened was that there were 3 instances where Muybridge, with other witnesses, had told Lukens to stay away from his wife. And so the jury, all male, of course, in those days, went into the room and said, hey, he warned this guy once, he warned this guy twice, he warned this guy 3 times. He did the best he could to defuse the situation. This guy didn't stop. He had it coming to him, I think, was, say, temporary insanity. And Muybridge was let off. And consequently, he did all the locomotion studies. Without that, you know, who knows when we would know when the horses ran with all their legs off the ground. And so here we have the horses with the legs all off the ground here. Next slide, please. This is a drawing. It's interesting. The first work of art I told you was a little monotype of the 2 trees, $1,300. The last work of art I bought just before the catalog went to press in 2011. Also cost $1,300. It cost 1,000 euros. I bought it in Paris. It was a double-sided drawing. There were 5 studies of horses on this double-sided drawing, and it only cost 1,000 euros. Why? Because nobody wanted it. Why? Because it was a drawing that Degas did totally for himself, not for us. It was not a presentation drawing, as they say. It has absolutely 0 wall power. Here's one side with 2 studies of horses. And the next slide, please. And here's 1, 2, 3 other studies. So I got 5 studies of horses, 200 euros a piece. But nobody wanted it. Why? Because, well, first of all, it's very slight. 2, it's very delicate. And 3, it's a horse's ass. Hey, but I'm a scholar, I don't care. Anyway, it's a wonderful drawing. But you see, Degas did it for himself. Drawings are means to an end. When artists make paintings, they make them, they finish them, they sign them. When artists make prints, they go through various stages till they get them just right, and they print up an edition. There's an implication of a finished work. Drawings are our means to an end. In a sense, what's more exciting? A copy of the Declaration of Independence or a first draft of the Declaration of Independence where it has all the crosses out and all the corrections and all of that? It's the difference between hearing Rhapsody in Blue and God help us if we can have a tape recording of Gershwin composing Rhapsody in Blue. Drawings are about the composition, the composing, the thinking through. That's what makes them so exciting, even though they can be very slight and not particularly important in the art market, which makes me happy as a clown. Okay? Next slide, please. Again, workhorses, nobody cared. Next slide. This is a drawing. Again, one of the things that is interesting in some of the drawings is that I have a portrait of Degas' brother. I have a portrait of Degas' father that I was lucky about. 2 self-portraits, one of which was given me. And then this is a drawing of Degas' maid. Degas had various housekeepers during his lifetime. He was a bachelor. As I always say, he's a non-practicing heterosexual. He was straight, but he just wasn't particularly interested in any sort of romantic liaison. He was interested in liaisons because he did all these beautiful bordello monotypes. But in terms of women in his life, that just wasn't it. So, but he did have housekeepers, and this particular one, Sabine Nate, by the inscription on the drawing is by Degas himself. That's Degas' handwriting. And she was his maid in the 1870s, the 1880s, and that's the address of his studio at the time. And this is the only maid that actually got into any of his pictures. She used him as the chaperone with the ballerinas. So you see her in numerous paintings of the period. I should also mention, one of the things, the only good thing about Degas' two idiot brothers, René and Achille, is because they blew up their business and caused all sorts of distress with their bankruptcy in New Orleans when their business went bad. There were all these bad debts that were on the two brothers. And they had nothing to do with Degas. Degas wasn't an investor or anything. But Degas had such a great sense of honor in his family's name that he painted numerous paintings in the 1870s, mostly ballet scenes, to sell commercially that he probably wouldn't have painted otherwise, to raise money to pay off his stupid brother's debts, to clean his family's name. That was one of the things I admire about Degas, his sense of honor with the family name, even though it had nothing to do with it. Next slide, please. Here is probably one of the more famous drawings in my collection. This is a drawing that is in many, many books, in European books on Degas. This is the portrait of Sabine Nate. And this is the portrait of Madame Ernest May. And Madame Ernest May was the wife of a stockbroker who was a major collector of Degas. They were friends. He was a Jewish stockbroker and a friend of Degas. They broke up over the Dreyfus affair, which Degas initially was very, very much against Dreyfus, there were certain ramifications of anti-Semitism that Degas and other people's attack on Dreyfus because he was a French officer who was Jewish, and because he was this great traitor, there was this kind of vehemence against that. And then all of these people had egg on their faces when it turned out that Dreyfus was, of course, completely innocent. And I might add that later in life, after Madame Ernest May here had passed away, Degas went to visit his old friend Ernest May and brought him not this drawing, but a small painted version of this portrait, which he gave to Ernest May as a memento of their friendship and the memory of Ernest May's late life. It's a really beautiful drawing. It's done in black, white, and red chalk. It's gorgeous. Next slide. A jockey drawing. Again, this is the latest drawing in my collection. It's a drawing where Degas is approaching his I don't give a damn period, where he's just drawing very, very, very rapidly and very boldly. Next slide, please. Prints. One of the things I got to mention about Degas' prints, and there's quite a number of prints in the show. God help me, I'm so lucky that Degas did sell his plates to Ambrose Villard. Degas is a really nutty guy. Most people who make prints, they make a print, they get it just right, and then they print an edition of 25, 50, 100. They sell the prints. It's a commercial thing. It's a multiple original which you can sell. Degas did his prints for himself. In fact, the only print that he actually gave away several impressions of is the self-portrait that's in the other room, which he gave away like 15 impressions to friends during his lifetime. But otherwise, he did a print, sometimes up to 23 different states to get it just the way he wants it. Then he put them all in the drawer. He only printed 1 or 2 of each impression. So they're very rare of each state, so they're very, very rare. Degas' prints, the self-portrait, for instance, hasn't come up in many, many years, but if a lifetime impression without the cancellation marks had come up, it would be like $1 million. It would be just a fortune. But what happened was, in 1910, 7 years before he died, Degas sold his copper plates to Ambrose Villard, which is a photograph of him on the wall behind all those books. He sold his plates to Ambrose Villard, knowing that Villard would print them later, and he put a couple of cancellation marks through them. Not to destroy them. If he wanted to destroy this plate, he could have just, abraded the face completely. He just wanted to differentiate. And so those plates have been printed after Degas' death. They are properly labeled in this exhibition as cancel plate impressions. But they're beautiful, and they get to show you what a terrific draftsman and what a good printmaker Degas was. The next slide, please. Here is that self-portrait. This is Degas. This is either Bob Dylan in Nashville Skyline was trying to be Bob Dylan, or Degas was trying to imitate Bob Dylan, I'm not sure which. But it's a wonderful self-portrait with this funny little hat on, and it's just a beautiful thing, and it's a beautiful impression, as you can see. So even though the plates have been canceled, I'm really happy to have them, and of course for scholarly reasons, they're really good in this exhibition. Next slide, please. This is very similar in terms of feeling to the beautiful portrait of Madame Damaska that's on the cover of the catalog. Next slide. This is a great example. The reason why is this in the show? Well, I'll tell you why it's in the show. It shows you that even a great chef can put too much salt in the soup. Okay? This is like the fourth state of 4, and there is only a single impression of the third state of 4 where the artist keeps adding things. The third state of 4 is in the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, and it is beautiful. And somehow Degas felt he had to keep fiddling with it, and he fiddled with it, and he screwed it up. And then he abandoned it. And the plate was sold to Vollard, and this is an impression from that fourth state that screwed up. God, I wish I had an impression of the third state, but the Boston Museum won't give it to me. But this is an example, not so much of, this is not a bad print. It just shows that sometimes, as Degas is an experimenter, sometimes you just go too far. And sometimes there'd be too much salt in the soup and nobody would drink it. And that's what this is an example of. Next slide. Edgar Degas met Manet in the Louvre as a young artist, and they became friends. And Degas honored the friendship by doing 3 prints and 1 painting of Manet, and Manet reciprocated by doing nothing of Degas. And here is the 3 portraits. This is the first one. I love that. Again, one of the things I keep mentioning about Degas, he is a man who almost thought like a camera. Like this is like a snapshot. It's not this formal portrait. Here's the guy. He's still got his outside coat on, and he's got his hat in his lap. So it's not one of these formal portraits. It's a very casual one. The next, please. Here he's got the top hat on the floor. Manet was a real boulevardier. He was a real man of the boulevard. Look at his kind of doe-skin colored pants, and he had a red beard, so he was quite the character. Next slide, please. This is a more powerful, more traditional type portrait. Unfortunately, the painting that Degas did of Manet and his wife playing the piano, Manet decided he didn't like the portrait of his wife, so he cut the painting in 2. And when Degas went to visit Manet and saw the painting cut in 2, he went bananas. And he insisted that the painting be returned to him. And then he took the painting that they had exchanged paintings. Manet had given him a beautiful little painting of plums that Degas adored. And Degas was so upset that he left the little painting of plums with the milk bottles at Manet's house to give it back. But then later, Degas said about Manet, you can never be mad at Manet for long because he was such a nice guy. But then he said that by that time Manet had sold the plums to somebody else. So painting back. Next slide, please. Here's a little dry point that Degas did one night of a man named Alphonse Hirsch, where each people did little dry points of each other on the same evening. And Degas took it back to his studio and added the aquatint to the cravat and all, but the face itself was scratched into a copper plate right one evening by Degas. Next slide, please. Next slide. Here is a great example, it's my only little example, of Degas' greatness as an artist of the ballet. And what's so great about it, God, I wish it was this big too in the original, is that here you see Degas' genius of the 19th century. This was done like 1870. And here he does a scene that would have completely pissed people off in 1870. Why? Because it's a scene of the ballet. And a conservative painter who was trying to suck up to the public would have painted a stage and the ballerinas dancing, and it would all been just so you could see it all. And Degas said, no. What if you're sitting in the 3rd row and the goddamn bass fiddles are blocking your view? Well, that's what you're seeing here. You're seeing it what it would be like in real life. And so you see some of the ballerinas. Here's a ballerina. You don't even see her tutu. You only see her head. Here you see more of the ballerina. But he's giving you that sense of the motion. And of course, Degas has used this kind of, it's called crayon electrique, to give this kind of tonality to the background, to give you the sense of artificial light. He's just a clever boy. But this is not something that this is the truth of your eye as opposed to the truth of trying to please. He was wanting to please himself, and everybody else would have to catch up with him, which is what great artists do. Excellent. We'll skip over these quickly. This is again a cancel plate. It's a beautiful print, but it's very, very rare. And it's a couple of ballerinas putting on their shoes and stuff like that. It's very delicate, but very, very slight. Next slide, please. And again, this is one here that Degas got in all sorts of trouble with, which is the woman getting out of the bathtub, getting out rather ungainly out of the bathtub with her maid holding her. She's rich enough to have a maid, so let's not. Her maid is holding the towel, and Degas was accused of showing women as animals. And the average painting of female nudity at this time in France was kind of the barroom nude, the naked woman lying on the couch winking, a little like the painting by Manet of Olympia, wearing a black ribbon, who basically says, "I'm sleeping with your husband," And what we have here is a different sort of thing. This is not a particularly attractive nude. She's rather heavy, and she's gotten out of the bathtub, and this is what is referred to as a keyhole picture. This is showing people as they really are. And again, that freaked people out in 1870 or 1880. But Degas was showing things as they really are. Next slide, please. It's a small, slight drawing. I just love it because it has kind of an oriental, the simplicity of it. He obviously started something and stopped, and that's the way it is. But it was something that was meaningful to me, but probably nobody else. Next slide. Again, another one. This is one that shows his interest in tonality. But again, he abandoned the plate at a certain point, so you don't have a face or anything, but it was a good beginning. Again, here's a singer on stage at night with the artificial sense of light, but it's not. You're not in the audience, you're backstage. He gives you a sense of behind the scenes. Next. And again, here in the dressing room, here's a woman fixing her hair, and here are these patterns to give you a sense of this is a room, this is a door, and then you're going through to another room with ballerinas or singers backstage. This kind of intimate behind-the-scenes quality that's really special. Okay. These are, there's two of them in the show. They're portraits of Mary Cassatt, but no face. But you know it's Mary Cassatt. Which is Mary Cassatt, and which is Mary Cassatt's timid younger sister? Well, the timid younger sister, of course, has got her head buried in the guidebook, and Mary Cassatt is confidently leaning on her umbrella, and as you see in the wall, you can see the reflections in the aquatent. He's trying to give you a sense of the reflected light in a natural light gallery with glass cases, because the Etruscan funereal memorial of the man and the woman, the husband and wife in the background, they're viewing. You can go to the Louvre, of course, and see that actual sculpture today. You're getting that sense of the immediacy of the moment. And what Degas is showing you is the sense of the personality through pose, not the personality through face. The next slide, please. And here is one of his masterpieces of printmaking. This is Mary Cassatt in the gallery of paintings, where if you blinked, you'd think that Mary Cassatt would walk right out of the picture because she's walking down the gallery looking at the paintings, leaving her poor sister looking at the guidebooks as usual again. But the sense of confidence in Mary Cassatt's pose, and the sense that this picture is 3 times as high as it is wide, is based on Degas' influence of Japanese printmaking. Because the Japanese prints that started to come into Paris in the 1860s and 70s, the Japanese made these pillar prints in the early 19th century, late 18th century, and these prints that had very much a lot of very bold things in the foreground of the pictures with a lot of cropping, plus the size are very much inspired by the Japanese art. You see this doorway that blocks your view is very much the way the Japanese would put bands of color in the foreground of their Japanese prints. Next. Degas was an experimental artist, and he had an open mind. And there was a man named Thornley who was a very good artist in his own right, but he also did these reproductive prints of Puy de Chavannes, an artist with whom I have a self-portrait in the show. And he liked this man's versions of Puvy's prints so much, he wanted to work with him on doing some original lithographs after some of Degas' own works. And so he did a series of, I think, 10 prints. And he worked back and forth with Thornley to get them just right, working on some of the proofs and things. And when the edition was finished, there was actually an edition of 100 with 75 regular edition, as this one here is, and then 25 prints of which Degas actually signed the prints himself, too. I could never afford the ones with the signature, and the prints are exactly the same. And I decided that, I'm not going to pay that much money for the signature. So my 3 in the show are exactly the same. This is the Song of the Dog, where this woman is barking like a dog as part of the song. You had to be there to enjoy it, I'm sure. Next slide, please. This is, if you go to the National Gallery in London, you'll see this exquisitely beautiful painting, which is about twice as big as the print. And this is a version of this beautiful print. And it gives you a wonderful sense of what the beach was like in the 19th century. If you notice, nobody's wearing a traditional bathing suit. Everybody's wearing, linen things and stuff. But it's just a beautiful sense of a moment in time. The next, please. This is the print that is the most Degas-like of everybody's natural conception of what Degas like. And it's basically the least has the least Degas fingerprints in the whole show. It's in the show because this is a print. A man named Auguste Clos was the greatest lithography printer of the late 19th century Paris. And he got all sorts of people like Renoir and Cézanne and other people to do lithographs. And he tried to get Degas to do a big lithograph. So Degas said, no, I don't have time, I don't want to do it. I will work with you. I will select a piece from my collection, from my oeuvre, and I will work with you on selecting it and helping you decide the colors and all of that. And so Clos actually drew it on the stone as people did, but Degas approved it, and this was the print. And it's quite rare, and I was able to buy an impression for the archivog, and I was able to get an impression for myself. And but it is what people normally think of Degas with color and all of that. And as I always say, when it comes to his pastels and his paintings, I'm a Johnson of the Manchester, New Hampshire Johnsons, not the Johnsons of the Johnsons and Johnsons. So that's why this is a lithograph after Degas. The next, please. And here is again another Thornley, and I just adore this piece. There is an original pastel of it, and Degas did this beautiful pastel of it, which he gave in memory. He gave it to a charity auction after a writer friend of his named Durante died, and who had bills and stuff, and so he gave it to raise money for the widow. And I just love it because here's Degas. He's so clever. It's not a woman dancing; it's a woman reading a newspaper, a little girl reading a newspaper. The next slide, please. This is a favorite of mine. Again, it's very tiny. It's in the other room. I got it a couple of years ago, and it's the ill-assorted couple. I love the fact that I've got this feeling that he is stoically looking ahead while she is quickly turning away. I don't think she's particularly happy with her mate there. And this is totally spontaneous. This is the artistic equivalent of listening to Thelonious Monk playing a passage on a piano. This is Degas being totally spontaneous. The 3 little monotypes in the show were done completely without models. He just did them from memory on a copper plate, which was then printed while the ink was still wet. So this is a totally piece of imagination of Degas, and it's like finger painting by a genius. Next slide, please. This is the little tree I told you about. This is that first work I got. It's just tiny, but it's beautiful. And of course, now that I think about it, it has a wonderful sense of the Orientalism, the sense of the inspiration from the Japanese that Degas had in his art in the 1870s. Next. And this is a prostitute, sorry, but it's true. This is the one little prostitute monotype that I got from that same series when Degas was involved over there, where there's these works after Degas monotypes. The next. This is a letter. This is a letter from Degas. I don't have anything that was signed by Degas except this letter. But I noticed that when he sent a letter to his good friend who was an artist, he didn't sign it Edgar. He was like Madonna and Prince, and he signed it Degas. He was Degas, okay? Next slide, please. This is a sculpture. Degas is an artist who, when he died, had only shown one of his sculptures his whole lifetime. He showed one sculpture of the little ballerina with a tutu, which is very famous, which you all know. But when he died, there were like 120 sculptures in various states of completion or disarray in his studio. He kept them completed to himself, and the family asked a man named Bartolome, which is a portrait of Bartolome in the show by his other great friend at the end of his life, Jeanino. He asked Bartolome, who was a sculptor, to go into the studio and tell the family how many of the sculptures could be saved, could be cast, possibly in bronze. And he didn't say, oh, let's make some money there, all good, you know. He said only about 70 could be saved. The other 40 had to be destroyed. They just were not completed, they weren't good enough. And so it was a very, very honest assessment. And they then cast in 1922 the remaining sculptures in a small edition of about 22. And consequently, Degas is, along with Rodin, one of the two greatest sculptors of the 19th century. Without the family doing what they did, without Bartolome saving those, without those being cast, this great sculptor's oeuvre would have been lost. You could go to the Metropolitan Museum today, and they have a whole little gallery full of all of Degas' sculptures. And Mrs. Havermeyer, who's a great friend of Mary Cassandra Degas, gave to the Metropolitan Museum. I'm lucky enough to have that one sculpture in the collection. And it was, you know, again, one of the things that happens as a collector is one of the greatest things beyond collecting art is collecting friendships. And the people you meet, both the scholars, your friends, the dealers, whatever, other curators, are the people that make the whole journey really interesting. And a friend of mine in Massachusetts was contacted by a friend who found that sculpture in a boot sale, as they say in England, in a flea market in England, and bought it and sold it to my friend who sold it to me. And without that friendship, I would have never been able to get that sculpture. So those sorts of daisy chains of connections are really special, and that's one of the things that really makes collecting such an interesting thing to do, whatever you collect. Next slide, please. One of the things that I should mention about Degas is in the 19th century, he was known, during his lifetime, he was known for two types of art. He was known for his pastels, and he was known for his paintings, okay? So he showed paintings and pastels, and that's what he's known for. My exhibition here at Degas has the 5 types of works that he didn't show during his lifetime. That's why it's called Edgar Degas, the Private Impressionist. He rarely showed his drawings, his prints, his sculptures, his monotypes, his photographs. He worked in those other 5 media, but he almost never showed them. And so the works of art that you see in this exhibition are works of art he really never showed. Now you say photography. Well, are those really serious photographs, or was he just taking snapshots? No, they were serious photographs. Degas would sometimes come to a dinner party, and just when people thought they were about to be ready to leave, Degas told everybody, don't leave the room. And he set up his cameras and his lights, and he made people pose for an hour or 2 to get just things right. And this is by artificial light, you know, by lamps and stuff. And so Degas was a serious photographer. In fact, there was a major show at the Metropolitan Museum of Degas photography. Here's Degas being actually funny. This is called the apotheosis of Degas. And Degas posed himself in the middle of the picture, and it's a parody of a painting by his great hero, next. Here we have other photographs. These are this photograph and the next one, please, are photographs of 2 of the daughters of a man named Leroll, who was an artist friend of his, who was in the late 19th century, and there's a photograph of the two Laurel girls on the cover of the Metropolitan Museum's catalog and expert. This is the most Degas of all the photographs in my show. It's only about 2 inches wide. It's a little contact print, but it's absolutely exquisite. And I might add, sometimes it's better to be lucky than smart. And I was lucky enough to have a dealer friend of mine who doesn't deal in photography say I have access to 6 photographs by Degas, and of which they weren't interested in, and so I was able to get 6 in one lot. Next slide, please. Here is a Degas photograph of his friend Rouard up there painting outdoors, and it's like a little Monet painting. It's fabulous. Next. Here we have Degas' idiot brother, René. I've got a drawing of one and a photograph of the other. But what's interesting down here are 2 of the greatest composers of the late 19th century, Ernest Chausson and Claude Debussy. Yeah, they traveled in nice circles. Next slide, please. And here's another one with René and Chausson and Debussy. And again, it's an Impressionist painting. The straw boaters by the water, fantastic. Degas, for a guy that was Mr. Indoors and ballerinas, he had a wonderful sense. And one of the things that's so great about his photographs is it shows Degas off duty. It shows him with en famille, not this grumpy misanthrope. Next slide, please. And here's Degas. I'm lucky enough to have 2 drawings of Degas. Here's a drawing of Degas in the 1890s by his friend Jean. He had 2 good friends, 2 close friends towards the end of his life, Bartolome and Jean. I have 2 self-portraits of Jean, and I have 2 portraits of Degas by Jean, and a portrait of Bartolome by Jean. So I have that whole circle locked up. Next slide, please.